The Natal Mounted Police. After the events of the Langele Rebellion in 1873, the Natal government was convinced of the need to raise a mobile, semi-military police force. The Natal government feared the risk of rebellion and insurrection. With a string of frontier wars and the threat of the Zulu kingdom, it was decided that the volunteer corps, however effective, would be insufficient to protect and police the colony. The colonial treasurer proposed raising a force capable of rapid reaction to any part of Natal in which trouble might occur. This would be centralized in Pietermaritzburg and also support the various magisterial districts. The force was initially authorized to raise 55 Europeans and 150 local natives. This force would be known as the Natal Mounted Police. Many a British officer settled in Natal to retire or to take up farming. The Natal authorities had decided to approach one particular man to appoint as the commandant for the Natal Mounted Police, should he agree. This was the 36-year-old Major John George Dardanel, a man who would soon become something of a legend in Natal. John Dardanel, also known as Hellfire Jack and Old Jackie, was born in London, Ontario, Canada, on the 2nd of July, 1838. He was educated in Ontario and joined the 86th Royal County Down Regiment as an ensign in 1855. He saw active service as a lieutenant in the Indian Mutiny, where he took part in the capture of Chandery and the storming of Yanzi Fortress in 1858. He was severely wounded, recommended for the Victoria Cross, and mentioned in dispatches. He would go up the ranks and see service in the 16th Bedfordshire and the 27th Inskilling, being promoted brevet major in 1865. He saw service in the Bhutan expedition as the aide-de-camp to General Toombs, V.C. In 1869, he retired to Greytown in Natal to take up farming. In 1873, he raised a force for service in the Langele Rebellion, and in 1874 was appointed Commandant of the Natal Mounted Police. John Dardanel went on a fact-finding mission to the Frontier Armed and Mounted Police in the Eastern Cape, and on his return, attested his first recruits in March 1874. Regimental No. 1 being allocated to Trooper George Babington on the 12th of March 1874. Dardanel also held a series of interviews to find suitable candidates for his two sub-inspectors. He decided on George Mansell and Frederick Alexander Campbell. The 32-year-old Englishman William Steen was appointed as Sergeant Major. He was formerly the Troop Sergeant Major of the Cape Mounted Rifles, and Dardanel would credit him for his highly professional training of recruits, and Steen would become a legend in the Natal Mounted Police. It was considered a rite of passage to be approved as fit for service by Sergeant Major Steen. The uniform of the Natal Mounted Police consisted of a tight-fitting uniform of black cord. The tunic had pointed cuffs, edged in black braid with a trifold knot, a black velvet collar, edged in black braid, and black twisted shoulder cords. The tunic also had 5 brass buttons. Trousers were plain black cord. A white helmet, similar to the British Foreign Service helmet, was worn. This had a dark band around it, with a brass spike and a brass badge bearing the monogram NMP. There was also a black pillbox undress cap, edged in black and bearing the monogram NMP. Black calf-length boots were issued. These were fastened with 6 buckled straps. A brown bandolier, pistol holster, and a white haversack were also issued. After Isandlwana, the NMP were permitted to wear British infantry trousers as supplies became a problem. The NMP established the headquarters behind Fort Napier, and by the end of October 1874, they had attested the full quota of 55 men. Long patrolling for weeks at a time through Natal became a regular operation for the unit. In 1875, the Natal Mounted Police was authorized to increase its numbers to 150 Europeans and 50 natives. They were now headquartered in Pietermaritzburg and had permanent detachments in Harding, Escourt, and Greytown. This period would see problems with desertions from the unit. In part to counter this, the unit would increasingly recruit from outside Natal, taking in many recruits from the United Kingdom. A good deal of these recruits would be the sons of high-ranking military personnel and from well-to-do families. Some recruits would also originate from France, Germany, Indian-born British, and other places. With patrolling being a constant task and an increased establishment, in 1876 a third sub-inspector was appointed, this being Frederick Lushington Phillips. In 1877, with the annexation of the Transvaal by the British, The Natal Mounted Police were to provide a 25-man escort under Sub-Inspector Phillips for Theophilus Shepstone, who was to take over administration of the colony. This was an assignment that lasted from the 14th of December 1877 until the 19th of June 1878. The escort mission was a milestone for the Natal Mounted Police, being tasked with such an important task, and it was the first time the NMP had operated outside of Natal's borders. From the end of 1877 to June 1878, the Cape government was involved in the 9th Cape Frontier War. In March 1878, a detachment of 3 officers and 88 men of the Natal Mounted Police were sent to the Umzimkhulu border with the 2nd Battalion, 3rd East Kents, the Buffs, to put down a rebellion that had briefly occurred in the area. No fighting took place, but it saw the Natal Mounted Police serving closely with the Buffs for 2 months. In November 1878, with Sir Bartle Frere's ultimatum to the Zulus, it was obvious that the Natal Mounted Police would be required for service in Zululand. Lord Chelmsford, having had difficulty convincing the Governor of Natal, Sir Henry Bulwer, to release the Natal Mounted Police and Volunteer Corps for service in Zululand, was eventually able to convince him and split these forces across his invasion columns. This in part made up for the total lack of British Imperial cavalry available to Lord Chelmsford for the invasion of Zululand. On the 8th of November 1878, General Order No. 188 placed Major Dartnell and the Natal Mounted Police under Lord Chelmsford's command. Initially, 90 men were made available for service in Zululand. Dartnell mobilised his 90 men, and they mustered at Helpmachar, where he would join No. 3 Column under Colonel Glynn. This column consisted of both battalions of the 24th Foot, N Battery Royal Artillery, No. 1 Squadron Mounted Infantry, the Natal Mounted Police, the Natal Carbineers, Buffalo Border Guard, Newcastle Mounted Rifles, 3rd Natal Native Contingent, and a company of native pioneers. This central column would be accompanied and effectively commanded by Lord Chelmsford himself, along with his staff. In preparation for the war, Natal was divided into 7 colonial defensive districts, in which each district commander would have command of the NMP in their district. These were mostly small detachments. Overall, the NMP had 4 officers, 174 NCOs and men, along with 55 natives scattered across Natal. On the 18th of November 1878, Sub-Inspector Mansell and Sub-Inspector Phillips joined Dartnell at Helpmachar, bringing with them 64 men. In total, the Natal Mounted Police would have 129 of all ranks serving with No. 3 Column on the eve of the invasion of Zululand. The Natal Mounted Police underwent training and preparation at Helpmachar with No. 3 Column in the build-up to the invasion. On the 5th of January, whilst addressing the troops, Lord Chelmsford complimented the Natal Mounted Police on their military bearing. It was also at this time that Brevet Major John Russell of the 12th Lancers was appointed to command the mounted elements of No. 3 Column. This caused a great deal of discontent and complaint from the NMP and the various volunteers, who had expected to be under the command of the ever-popular and local Major Dartnell. As a compromise to the situation, Lord Chelmsford, wanting to keep his authority over the entire military force, insisted his appointment of Russell would remain. Russell would now hold the local rank of Lieutenant Colonel. However, Major Dartnell would be appointed to Lord Chelmsford's staff. Inspector Mansell took over the direct command of the Natal Mounted Police in No. 3 Column. George Tubby Mansell was born in Cornwall 1845. He sailed to Natal in 1873, and in that year he served with the Weenan Yeomanry during the Langelabelile Rebellion. He was appointed as Sub-Inspector in the Natal Mounted Police in 1874, and was the Natal Mounted Police's first appointed officer. As a Sub-Inspector, he would go on to command multiple patrols that lasted anywhere from a couple of weeks to a couple of months. In 1878, he was promoted to Inspector. Lord Chelmsford was doubtful of Mansell's abilities, commenting, "The police hang too much on Major Dartnell and the proper commanding officer. Mr. Mansell does not appear to be capable of getting oats for his horse without Major Dartnell's assistance." The 9th of January saw the Natal Mounted Police move down to Rorke's Drift in preparation for the expiry of the ultimatum and the invasion of Zululand. Some troopers had ridden to No. 4 Column with dispatches for Colonel Wood. The 11th of January would see the Natal Mounted Police providing an escort to Lord Chelmsford as he rode to Red Hill, where he met Wood to discuss the coordination of the invading columns. One of the NMP, Trooper William Fletcher, would get lost in the fog and only find his way back to Rorke's Drift that night. The 11th of January would also see No. 3 Column cross the river into Zululand at the expiration of the ultimatum. The Natal Mounted Police rode with the column into enemy territory. The following day would see the first action for the Natal Mounted Police, as 100 of their number were involved in the fighting around Sehayo's territory. The 24th and the NNC assaulted the high ground of a Zulu homestead, and fighting took place against a force of Zulus among the rocks and caves. Russell was ordered to work his way around the right flank to an area of high ground to cut off the Zulus moving that way. The maneuver was completed, and the Natal Mounted Police, alongside the mounted infantry and some of the volunteers, moved to a large homestead where they engaged in a skirmish with a small force of Zulus. Trooper Clark would recall of the incident. At the neck, no opposition was offered, and the carbineers with the mounted infantry had just passed the round of the mountain out of our sight when the Zulus suddenly opened fire on us, at a range of about 200 yards, with their old blunderbusses, which gave out a report like a 15-pounder field gun. Their marksmanship was bad, and before they had time to reload, the even numbers had dismounted while the odd numbers had put the horses safely out of range. The dismounted men advanced in skirmishing order, but the enemy made no sort of stand. At the top of the hill, we had some practice at retreating natives, of whom a few were killed, and I was astonished to find how difficult it is to hit a running man. At the opposite edge of the hill, we met the infantry, who had been more hotly engaged. Returning from the skirmish, the Natal Carbineers and the Natal Mounted Police found the time to seize some nearby cattle. Although the fighting hadn't been very severe for the NMP, it did mark their first large engagement in Zululand. The following days saw the Natal Mounted Police under Inspector Mansell, as part of Russell's force, going a patrol, scouting the road ahead for the column, and providing vedettes when the column halted. On the 20th of January, No. 3 Column established a camp at Isandlwana. The Natal Mounted Police had provided the advance guard as the column approached the camp, and once there, they sent out 4 pairs of troopers up to 5 miles out to provide vedettes. It was here that Mansell had 2 disagreements with the principal staff officer to No. 3 Column, Major Cleary. Mansell felt the camp was in a poor location, for which he was ignored, and then he was ordered to bring the vedettes in closer. Both Mansell and Sub-Inspector Phillips expressed concerns about the location of the camp. Particularly, they felt it was vulnerable to the rear. The Natal Mounted Police sent out a detachment to patrol a mile or so along the track to Ulundi. They encountered no Zulus. Some of the men then provided vedettes, while others took the chance to rest in their allocated position in the camp alongside the rest of the mounted troops. The 21st of January would see Lord Chelmsford send out a large portion of the mounted men and the NNC on a patrol, each portion of the force taking different routes. Dardanel would lead the mounted portion of the patrol, much to the joy of the NMP. 91 members of the Natal Mounted Police would be on this patrol. 33 would be left at the camp at Isandlwana. Later, a troop of Parsons would be sent back to the camp in disgrace for an accidental discharge, bringing the number up to 34. These 34 men were also in a company of at least 1 native constable, by the name of Madijeni. The Natal Mounted Police went with the rest of the patrol southeast of Isandlwana, and having set off early in the morning, they off-saddled at 2 p.m., having located no significant numbers of Zulus. Later that afternoon, Mansell and a small group of the NMP and Carbineers engaged a group of around 400 Zulu warriors at a range of around 700 yards. Apparently, some good shooting was done. The warriors proceeded to deploy into our left and right horn. Seeing this, Mansell promptly withdrew his men. They had taken some fire, with trooper Robert Lytton writing bullets had torn off his spur and his helmet was knocked off by a throwing spear. Dardanel, having now located a large portion of the enemy, decided not to break contact and remained overnight in the area with the mounted men and the NNC under Commandant Lonsdale. Word was sent back to Lord Chelmsford of the discovery. The men of the Natal Mounted Police had expected to be back at the camp that night and were unprepared, particularly lacking food. The night would see false alarms and panic, and would see the NNC bolt to seek shelter alongside the Natal Mounted Police and other volunteers. The night was a very uneasy one for the NMP. They fully expected a large engagement in the morning. Early on the 22nd, Lord Chelmsford took most of his force out to meet with Dardanel and Lonsdale and try to bring on a general engagement with the Zulus. The Zulu army would instead launch a massive and devastating attack on the British camp at Isandlwana. Dardanel's patrol was up and active. Upon the arrival of Lord Chelmsford with his large force, Dardanelle ordered Inspector Mansell to follow up the Zulu forces seen in the area. A local prominent Zulu, called Machana, had been seen, and Mansell with his NMP detachment pursued. The Zulus were driven towards the Natal native contingent, and a skirmish broke out in the hills and caves, in which Trooper Clark reckoned 60 Zulus were killed. After the skirmishing, Mansell and Dardanelle led their forces back to where Lord Chelmsford had established himself, made their reports, and let the troopers rest with some tea and biscuits. Firing had been heard towards the camp at Isandlwana. At first it was believed that the attack had been driven off, but by mid-afternoon rumours were circulating around the camp had been taken. Lord Chelmsford went ahead with the mounted infantry and volunteers. Commandant Brown and his NNC had already been sent back to the camp, though he stopped when he saw the sheer amount of Zulu warriors between him and the camp. Dardanelle and Mansell led their troopers to catch up, as in time the whole of Lord Chelmsford's force was redirected back to Isandlwana. The Natal Mounted Police at Isandlwana were under the command of Corporal Michael Lally, an Irishman whose father had seen service with the 45th Regiment. Lally himself was a veteran of the 9th Cape Frontier War, in which he served with the Frontier Armed and Mounted Police. The story of the Battle of Isandlwana is a complicated one that deserves a multitude of books, videos, essays, and documentaries that cover it. The men of the Natal Mounted Police played a small part in this battle, mostly concentrated on the eastern side of the camp. The NMP would find themselves fighting alongside Colonel Durnford, Captain Bradstreet, and a mix of men from the Natal Native Horse, Natal Carbineers, Newcastle Mounted Rifles, and the Buffalo Border Guard. These men would fight long and hard against the brave and skillful attack of the Zulu left horn, made up from the Inkombamigosi and the Uve Amaboto. The NMP fought well and hard, with steady carbine and pistol fire as they held the famous Donga and were eventually forced back. The NMP eventually made a last stand with the other mounted men, some infantry, and Colonel Durnford at the wagon park. Interviewed after the battle, Melokale Zulu recalled, "When we closed in on the camp, we came on to a mixed party of mounted men and infantrymen who had evidently been stopped by the end of our horn. These numbered about 100. They made a desperate resistance, some firing pistols and others using swords, and I repeatedly heard the word fire given by someone, but we proved too many for them, and killed them all where they stood." Of the 34 NMP troopers and one native constable who fought at Isandlwana, only 10 were able to escape with their lives. These were Corporal Dorhill, Lance Corporal Eaton, Trumpeter Stevens, Trooper Collier, Trooper Doig, Trooper Hayes, Trooper Kincardine, Trooper Shannon, Trooper Sparks, and Native Constable Madijene. These men who did escape did so on horseback, making their way down the infamous Fugitives Trail. Escaping through the pursuing Zulus down difficult terrain, many of those escaping the battle would be killed on the trail. Those who escaped crossed the Umzinyati River and out of Zululand. Stevens and Madijene escaped together. Madijene was able to rescue Stevens' horse, and the pair made their way to Helpmekar. Trooper Hayes became stuck in the mud and was helped out by Dorhill, as well as a sergeant of the artillery and a mounted infantryman. The group made their way to Helpmekar. Collier made his way back to Helpmekar alone, whilst Doig and Shannon made their way to Rorke's Drift and then further to Ladysmith. The rest of the NMP died fighting with Durnford, where around 20 NMP bodies were found, or during their escape attempt. 4 were found near the river in the process of their attempted escape. Trooper Pierce was killed heading back into the camp in search of his horse bit. Trooper Plader was found dead by the water cart he drove, and Trooper Simpson along the Fugitives Trail. Eventually, as darkness engulfed the battlefield, Lord Chelmsford and his force arrived at the scene, the NMP there with them. Many of the Natal Mounted Police attempted to find the bodies of their comrades or seek out any belongings in the camp. The whole force spent a haunted and restless night on the battlefield. It was observed that gunfire could be heard and the glow of flames could be seen in the direction of Rorke's Drift. Many likely assumed the worst. In the hospital of Surgeon Reynolds at the mission station of Rorke's Drift, there were 3 members of the Natal Mounted Police. Trooper Harry Luck had injured both of his knees in a fall from his horse, and Troopers Robert Green and Sidney Hunter were both suffering from rheumatic fever. Trooper Luck recalled a Natal Carbineer and later 2 members of the Natal Mounted Police, Troopers Doig and Shannon, all came through telling of the disaster at Isandlwana and warning of the coming attack on Rorke's Drift. It was decided that the mission station would be fortified and defended. Those wounded in the hospital who were able to took up positions and were suitably armed. Trooper Luck bound up the stock of his damaged Swinburne Henry carbine and fired with some considerable effect from the loophole in a hospital. The Zulus launched repeated, brave and determined attacks on the mission station, and eventually it was necessary for the defenders to shorten the perimeter, and at around 1900 the hospital had to be evacuated. All 3 NMP troopers were able to escape the hospital. However, Trooper Hunter was killed before he reached safety. Lieutenant Chard later reported. Trooper Hunter, Natal Mounted Police, escaping the hospital, stood still for a moment, hesitating which way to go. Dazed by the glare of the burning hospital and the firing that was going on all around, he was assagaied before our eyes, the Zulu who killed him immediately afterwards falling. It would seem that Trooper Hunter had used his pistol to great effect before falling, killing 3 Zulus before being stabbed. It's unclear if Hunter was able to shoot the Zulu who stabbed him, or if this warrior was killed by one of the men from B Company. Troopers Green and Lugg escaped with an NNC corporal called Jesse Mayer and a Royal Artillery bombardier called Thomas Lewis. As Green was very weak, Hunter was assisting him. Green was struck in the cheek by a spent round as he was making his way to the British barricade. The 2 NMP remained behind the barricade until the relief of the mission station on the 23rd of January. With the relief of Rorke's Drift, the 2 surviving NMP men were reunited with those in No. 3 column who were with Dardanel's patrol. Reportedly, Dardanel met Trooper Lugg with tears in his eyes and said, "I never thought of seeing you alive again, my boy." Trooper Clark of the Natal Mounted Police recalls that around 375 Zulus were buried around the mission station. A Trooper Sparks was detailed for a dispatch riding duty and was sent to deliver a message to Sir Bartle Frere in Pietermaritzburg. He then made his way to Helpmekaar, where the garrison was busy fortifying their position. On the 24th of January, Sergeant Major Steen handpicked 20 NMP men to provide an escort for Lord Chelmsford and Major Dardanel to Pietermaritzburg via Ladysmith. At Ladysmith, they found the Isandlwana survivors, Troopers Shannon and Doig, who were ordered to Helpmekaar where the NMP were concentrating. A corporal with a 10-man detachment stayed at Rorke's Drift with the garrison there. After the defeat of No. 3 column, there was a scramble along the border to prepare for a possible Zulu counter-invasion. Many district commanders found the resources scarce and the remaining NMP forces too weak. Places such as Pietermaritzburg and Greytown had only a handful of troopers. The surviving Natal Mounted Police were for the most part concentrated at Helpmekaar, where they undertook the duties of patrolling, establishing vedettes and dispatch riding. On the 5th of February, the Natal Mounted Policemen were on parade for the triumphant return of the colours of the 1st 24th that were lost in a river during the escape from Isandlwana. Inspector Mansell was still in the role of commanding officer of the NMP. Down on the southern border, men of the NMP Harding detachment lobbied to be allowed to join the rest of the police at Helpmekaar, but were refused, them being needed to defend the southern border. The Natal Mounted Police in the laager at Helpmekaar found themselves in a strong earthwork defence, but sanitation was poor. The worst of the sick were sent to Fort Pine or Landman's Drift, but at least 6 men died of disease from the laager. One trooper, a Trooper Smith, shot himself in delirium on the 27th of February. The responsibility for the Natal Mounted Police during this time, with the breaking up of No. 3 column, was to guard the border from Helpmekaar to Newcastle. The Natal Mounted Police would patrol and send out detachments along the border at this time, such as a large patrol to Ladysmith. The conditions were often harsh. On the 5th of March, one trooper wrote a letter that was later published in the Natal Witness. With the exception of a stink of rotten mealies and the rain continually swilling through and through, the fort is not so bad, being so strong and well built that the men here could hold it against the whole Zulu army. It is not healthy though, for the hospitals are always full, and we have had 8 or 10 deaths here. Hay of the Carbineers died last night. One of the NMP shot himself last week, and several engineers have been kicked out. What with guards, vedettes, etc., the duties are very heavy. There was also the issue of finding new recruits to replace the losses. Major J. Goldsmith Rolls, the emigration agent for the Natal in London, was busy recruiting 60 men that were requested in February. These recruits signing up in London would have a 3-year contract. 6-month short service contracts were also advertised locally in Natal. The 14th of March saw Lieutenant Colonel Black lead a patrol to the battlefield at Isandlwana. This patrol consisted of many mixed elements, including Major Dardanel and 10 of the Natal Mounted Police. The Zulus burnt damp wood to signal the British advance and fired some ineffectual shots, but there was no real resistance. Corporal Groschke of the Natal Mounted Police found the 24th Colour Belt, and the NMP made their way with the others across the sombre battlefield and followed the line of corpses that marked out the fugitives' trail. On the 2nd of April, Lord Chelmsford fought the Battle of Ginginglovu, and on the 3rd relieved Ashoe. During this time, Dardanel, with 61 Natal Mounted Police, as well as Natal Carbineers, Natal Mounted Contingent, and Natal Native Contingent, led a patrol from Rorke's Drift in the direction of Isandlwana. They saw a little skirmishing and burnt a number of Zulu huts and homesteads before returning to the Natal. The patrol was unfavourably described as a useless movement which only led to retaliation. The 18th of April would see 75 NMP leave Helpmacar and travel to Dundee, where the new 2nd Division was being assembled under Major General Newdigate. They provided an escort to Newdigate, to Baltisbrut, and back to Dundee again before being inspected by Lord Chelmsford on the 30th. They provided an escort to Lord Chelmsford once more to Baltisbrut, and back again, only then to receive orders back to Helpmacar. Many of the Natal Mounted Police, along with the other Natal volunteer units, were bitterly disappointed to not be joining the enormous juggernaut that was the British second invasion of Zululand. After the outcry in Natal, with the losses at Isandlwana, Lord Chelmsford was reluctant to take the volunteers into Zululand once more. The Natal Mounted Police would not join the final invasion. On the 21st of May, a 60-man detachment of the Natal Mounted Police would join General Frederick Marshall on his patrol to Isandlwana to recover usable wagons and carts and start dealing with some of the dead. Dardanel led the NMP section. The Natal Mounted Police were able to locate and identify all of their dead. It was also clear how and where the NMP members fought and died, many dying during the last stand of Durnford. One witness described the condition of the corpses. There were no skeletons. Everybody had skin drawn tightly over the bones. In small consolation, the diamond ring of Sub-Inspector Phillips was recovered. 55 new recruits arrived at the Natal Mounted Police headquarters in Pietermaritzburg on the 3rd of June. 3 were recruited locally in Natal, while the rest had arrived from England. 5 of these recruits previously held commissions in the British Army. 1, Clement Secretan, was the cousin of the 2 Secretan brothers already with the NMP, one having fallen at Isandlwana. Another already had combat experience fighting in the Ninth Cape Frontier War with the FAMP, and was more recently with the Natal Native Contingent. This was Trooper John Bowman. On the 8th of June, the Natal Mounted Police would provide part of the escort of the Prince Imperial's body after he was killed on patrol. Members of the NMP would escort the body all the way to Durban Wharf, where it arrived on the 11th. Major Dardanel was appointed Inspector General of Colonial Forces in Natal, surely to the delight of the NMP, on the 1st of July. The NMP did not take any part in the final defeat of the Zulu army at Ulundi on the 4th of July, though now, with the pitched battles over and the Zulu army broken, there was still the need to pacify Zululand and find the now fugitive King Cetshwayo. General Garnet Wolseley was now commander of the British forces in South Africa, having been brought in ostensibly because Lord Chelmsford was in constant friction with the Natal and Cape government officials. Although Lord Chelmsford could have continued to serve under Wolseley, he elected to ignore his orders until he had his victory at Ulundi, and then resign his command. General Order No. 14, dated the 26th of July, put the Natal Mounted Police under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Russell as part of a flying column. The Natal Mounted Police was commanded by Inspector Mansell within the flying column. A small detachment of the Natal Mounted Police was to provide escort to Wolseley. Many small patrols of NMP troopers were underway across Zululand, and troopers of the NMP were present at the recovery of the 2 7-pounders lost at Isandlwana. During the search for King Cetshwayo, an NMP detachment missed the king by a day at one homestead, whilst a 13-man detachment was part of the force that found the king's pet herd of cattle. These were sold to the commissariat. Eventually, King Kitchwaya was captured by members of the 1st Dragoon Guards on the 28th of August. The Zulu War now being well and truly over. The King of the Zulus captured, the Great Zulu Army broken, and Zululand firmly under British control. The Natal Mounted Police had performed an important and memorable part of the Great War between the British Empire and the Zulu Kingdom. The men of the Natal Mounted Police had fought hard battles, suffered great losses, performed exhausting patrols, shivered in unsanitary forts, and performed many escort duties. Being the only full-time professional force in Natal, it is easy to see why such a large part was played by the Natal Mounted Police. Routinely, the men of the NMP were trusted on important escort duties over long distances, and their patrols covered great swathes of Natal and Zululand. The troopers had fought with great skill and courage at Isandlwana and Rorke's Drift, as well as in countless small skirmishes. Major Dardanel lived up to his reputation and performed a very notable and important personal role in the war. The NMP had left a record to be proud of, consistently attracting praise from those they came into contact with and playing their part well. These troopers of such diverse background proved themselves a capable force and would continue to do so in the years after the Zulu War. Sources for this video were Blue Blood Troopers in Zululand, a biographical record of the Natal Mounted Police in the Anglo-Zulu War, 1879, by Cameron Simpson. Zulu Rising, by Ian Knight. How Can Man Die Better, by Mike Snook. And Zulu War Volunteers, Irregulars and Auxiliaries, by Ian Castle. This was a video by Yet Another History Channel. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, comment, share and subscribe to help support the channel, and I hope this was of interest to somebody somewhere.